What if I told you that one of the darkest periods in human history was not a war, but an economic crisis? It was a time when the world's economic heartbeat faltered, leaving millions in a state of despair. The Great Depression, as it is ominously known, left an indelible mark on the global socio-economic landscape, the reverberations of which can still be felt today. It all started with the infamous stock market crash in October of 1929. This was no ordinary downturn. It was a catastrophic event that sent shockwaves around the world, plunging nations into a deep economic abyss. The breadlines grew longer, the unemployment rate soared, and the world was in a state of economic freefall. From Wall Street to the farthest corners of the globe, no one was spared the harsh reality of this economic catastrophe. It was a decade of despair, a time when the world held its breath, waiting for a respite that seemed elusive. This was the Great Depression, a decade of despair that changed the world forever. Before the storm, there was a calm. The 1920s, known as the Roaring Twenties, were a time of unprecedented economic growth and prosperity. It was an era that shimmered with promise and potential. The post-war economy was booming, and new technologies like the car, the radio, and the telephone were transforming everyday life. The United States was a buzzing hive of innovation and progress, but beneath this gleaming surface there were warning signs. The economy was riding high on a wave of speculation and easy credit. The stock market had become a national obsession, with many Americans borrowing money to invest. It was a game everyone seemed to be winning. The allure of Wall Street was irresistible. The market was on a seemingly unstoppable upward trajectory, and many believed that the traditional rules of economics had been suspended. This reckless optimism fueled a stock market bubble of epic proportions. The belief that shares would always go up encouraged even more investing, inflating the bubble further. However, the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties was not shared by all. Farmers struggled with falling prices and heavy debt, and many workers saw their wages stagnate. Meanwhile, the wealth gap widened, with the rich getting richer while the middle class and poor struggled to keep up. It was a decade of contrasts, of excess and hardship. And then there was the issue of debt. The unprecedented economic growth was built on a precarious foundation of borrowed money. Individuals, businesses, and even the government were all living beyond their means. The debt was like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. The Roaring Twenties were a time of great economic optimism, but they were also a prelude to disaster. The reckless optimism, the stock market bubble, the widening wealth gap, and the mountain of debt were all factors that set the stage for the Great Depression. It was a period of unchecked excess that would ultimately lead to the deepest and longest-lasting economic downturn in the history of the Western industrialized world, but as we know, what goes up must come down. October 29th, 1929, a day known as Black Tuesday, marked the beginning of the Great Depression. Black Tuesday wasn't just another day on Wall Street, it was the day the music stopped, the day the Roaring Twenties came to a grinding halt. The stock market, which had been the wild party everyone wanted in on, suddenly turned into a nightmare. This was the day when the stock market crashed, and the world changed forever. For months there had been signs that the market was overheated. Stocks were overpriced and speculation was rampant. But the party went on, with investors borrowing heavily to buy shares, confident that the prices would keep going up. And then, on Black Tuesday, the bubble burst. The market plunged, and investors panicked. By the end of the day, billions of dollars had been wiped off the value of stocks. The crash didn't just hit Wall Street, it sent shockwaves across the country and around the world. Banks failed, businesses went under, and millions of people lost their jobs. The once booming economy was now in free fall, and the optimism of the 20s was replaced by fear and uncertainty. The Great Depression had begun. In the aftermath, people scrambled to understand what had happened. Some blamed Wall Street for its reckless speculation. Others pointed to the government's failure to regulate the market properly. But the damage was done. The crash had not only wiped out fortunes, but it also shattered confidence in the economy. People stopped spending, businesses stopped investing, and the economy spiraled downwards. What followed were years of hardship and struggle as the world grappled with the worst economic crisis in its history. The crash of 1929 was more than just a market meltdown. It was a turning point, a moment when the world realized the dangers of unchecked speculation and the fragility of the global economy. In a matter of days, fortunes were lost and the world was thrust into an economic crisis. In the wake of the crash, the world spiraled into the Great Depression. The early 1930s were a time of deepening crisis. The once vibrant economies of the world were now left gasping for breath. This wasn't a sudden collapse, but rather a slow, agonizing descent into an economic abyss. The stock market crash of 1929 had set off a chain reaction, and by the 1930s, the world was firmly in the grip of the Great Depression. Unemployment was rampant. In the United States, 1 in 4 people were without a job. Across the pond in the United Kingdom, unemployment figures were equally grim. Jobs were scarce, and those lucky enough to have them often faced reduced hours and lower pay. The economic crisis was not just about job losses, it was also about the loss of savings. Banks were failing left and right, unable to meet the demands of their panicked customers. People who had entrusted their life savings to these institutions found themselves penniless overnight. The banking system, once a symbol of stability and trust, was now a harbinger of uncertainty and fear. Adding to the misery was the Dust Bowl. This environmental disaster, brought on by years of drought and poor farming practices, turned millions of acres of fertile farmland into a barren wasteland. Thousands of families, unable to grow crops or pay their mortgages, were forced to abandon their homes. And this wasn't just an American issue. The Great Depression was a global phenomenon. From Europe to Asia, from Australia to South America, no corner of the world was spared. Economies around the globe were interconnected, and the shockwaves from the crash reverberated far and wide. The world was in the grip of an economic crisis unlike any seen before. It was the Great Depression, a time of hardship and struggle, a time that tested the resilience of people and nations. But it was also a time that would shape the course of history, setting the stage for dramatic changes in the years to come. In the midst of despair, a new leader emerged with a promise of change. This was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man whose name is inextricably linked with the term the New Deal. Indeed, Roosevelt's New Deal was a promise of a better future, a beacon of hope in the darkest hours of the Great Depression. The New Deal was not a singular program, but a series of reforms introduced between 1933 and 1939. Its goals were threefold: relief for the unemployed and poor, recovery of the economy back to normal levels, and reform of the financial system to prevent a repeat of the Depression. This was often referred to as the 3 Rs: relief, recovery, and reform. For relief and immediate recovery, Roosevelt implemented programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which provided jobs in the conservation and development of natural resources in rural lands. The Works Progress Administration, another program, employed millions to carry out public works projects. These programs didn't just provide jobs, they restored dignity and hope to people who had lost so much. But the New Deal went beyond immediate relief. It aimed for long-term reform as well. The Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 established the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which protected bank depositors and curbed risky speculative practices. The Securities and Exchange Commission was formed to regulate the stock market and prevent fraudulent practices. In essence, the New Deal was about more than economic recovery. It was about restoring faith in the American dream. It was about telling the American people that their government cared about them, that they were not alone in their struggles. It was, in all senses, a beacon of hope. Of course, the New Deal was not without its critics. Some felt it went too far, others not far enough. But regardless of the criticism, there's no denying that it drastically transformed American society and the economy. It paved the way for a more active government, one that plays a significant role in ensuring the economic welfare of its citizens. The New Deal was a beacon of hope in a time of darkness. It was a testament to the resilience of the American spirit, a reminder that even in the bleakest times we can find the courage to change, to seek out hope, and to move forward. As the 1930s drew to a close, so did the Great Depression. This decade-long economic slump had left its mark on society, but the clouds were finally starting to lift. The end of the Great Depression was not brought about by a single event, but rather a series of factors that slowly but surely started to turn the tide. One of the most significant of these was the onset of World War II. The war effort resulted in an unprecedented level of industrial activity as factories were repurposed to produce everything from tanks to ammunition. This surge in production led to a rise in employment, injecting life back into the economy. Simultaneously, the government was implementing policies and programs aimed at recovery. The New Deal, spearheaded by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was instrumental in this respect. Its goal was to stabilize the economy and provide relief to those affected by the Depression. It introduced reforms in banking and finance and invested heavily in public works projects, creating jobs and stimulating growth. As the economy began to recover, people started to regain their confidence. Businesses reopened, people found work, and families could once again afford the simple pleasures of life. The end of the Great Depression marked a new chapter in America's history, one of resilience and renewal. However, the Great Depression had long-term effects that extended beyond its official end. It changed the way people thought about economics and the role of government. It led to a greater understanding of economic cycles and the need for government intervention during downturns. It highlighted the importance of a balanced economy and the dangers of excessive speculation. The Great Depression was a period of hardship and struggle, but it was also a time of resilience and change. It taught us valuable lessons that continue to inform economic policy and shape our understanding of financial systems. It was a time when society faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger on the other side. The Great Depression was a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, a spirit that refuses to be broken, even in the face of the greatest challenges. The Great Depression left a lasting mark on the world. It was a period characterized by economic despair, but it also served as a catalyst for sweeping changes and transformations. Looking back, the Great Depression was a complex tapestry woven from numerous threads. It began with a devastating stock market crash in 1929, a byproduct of unchecked speculation and shaky banking practices. The subsequent descent into depression was marked by widespread unemployment, poverty, and despair. But even amidst the darkness, there were beacons of hope. The New Deal policies introduced by President Franklin D. Roosevelt helped to stabilize the economy and provide relief for millions of Americans. These policies laid the groundwork for the modern welfare state and continue to influence our social and economic policies today. The end of the Great Depression came with the onset of the Second World War. The war effort stimulated the economy and pulled the United States out of the economic abyss. Yet the impact of the Depression was far from over. It had exposed the vulnerabilities of the capitalist system and led to significant changes in economic theory and policy. The Great Depression taught us valuable lessons. It showed us the importance of financial regulation, the dangers of economic inequality, and the need for a social safety net. It also demonstrated the resilience of the human spirit and the power of collective action in the face of adversity. The legacy of the Great Depression is still felt today. It has shaped our economic policies, our social attitudes, and our understanding of the world. It has left an indelible mark on our collective consciousness, reminding us of the potential pitfalls of unchecked capitalism and the importance of economic stability. The Great Depression was a dark chapter in our history, but it's a chapter we must never forget. It serves as a stark reminder of the consequences of economic mismanagement and the devastating impact it can have on society. As we navigate the economic challenges of the present, we would do well to remember the lessons of the past.